Should I
Mary, why
start
don't you
over?
just start over?
Yeah, start over.
The letter we have this evening is from Socrates Vela. Again, you decide to promote misinformation with this email. This statement is not a fact. As part of these efforts, we continue to investigate and evaluate the possibility of implementing routine COVID-19 screening testing for students and staff. Such programs have proven highly successful in identifying symptomatic, asymptomatic, and pre-symptomatic carriers of COVID-19. Finding such cases could be critical to our efforts to control the spread of COVID-19 in our community and keeping our schools safe and open. This should not be in your communications. You are not qualified to make this statement. The CDC has come out today and has said that kids are not super spreaders, just like I believed 8 months ago. The other flaw in your plan is that all of these tests have high variability, and you would have to offer at least 3 tests in order to get a statistically acceptable number. If you are not prepared to do that, stop using the language you have in this email. Lastly, where did you come up with a 70% participation rate? That, again, is not a fact. Why do you have PhDs if you are going to get involved with misinformation? The further frustrating part, you guys keep saying one thing and end up doing something else. First, you say we are going to open, kids get all excited, and then you fail them. The other thing is that having kids with a tutor in a gymnasium or a cafeteria is not hybrid. Put on your PhD hats and come up with more very viable and creative ideas. Stop resting on your laurels. You hiding behind board is just that, hiding. And most think it is okay, but I do not. Cut the BS and stick to the facts. That's all I have.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mary. I am going to make one response to that. Since I wrote it, at least that portion of it, I have reread it multiple times.
Pat Rudy, President.
And it is still not clear to me which part of that information is not factual. So I'm going to stand by the statement that we made. We can certainly debate the 70% number. The 70% number is an estimate of what we think we need in order to have an effective program. So maybe that's not a fact, that is an opinion. But I think every other statement that's in there is in fact factually accurate based on things that I have read from a number of sources. So I'm more than happy to be challenged on it, but I want to make it clear that there's certainly no attempt on my part there to distort any facts that are well known in the literature on COVID.
Pat Rudy, President.
Okay. Next, the president's report. I'll open it up to our student school board representatives, and I'll let you guys decide the order in which you would like to go tonight. Who's going to start?
Student representatives.
So VHHS was going to start, and we wanted to start off by speaking about teacher-directed Wednesdays.
Okay.
On behalf of Diego, Kayla, and I, we have had a great experience with teacher-directed Wednesdays. On average, Diego and I have 3 to 4 Zoom classes. Teachers who aren't holding Zoom classes use Google Classroom to post assignments or to distribute information. Some teachers use this day to teach short lessons or to hold quizzes or tests. From what we've heard from other students, most of them look forward to teacher-directed Wednesdays because it's a more relaxed day and students can move at their own pace. They also have the opportunity to catch up on work or get ahead. Now on to the LHS board reps for their opinions on teacher-directed Wednesdays.
Student representatives. Student representatives. Student representatives.
Okay, I'll start. I personally like teacher-directed Wednesdays because it's a good balance between asynchronous and synchronous, because asynchronous, I found myself doing absolutely nothing and treating the work like homework or doing it during office hours the next day. But synchronous, I found myself so burnt out by like 5th period, which isn't even like that close to the end of the day. And I also felt like, so a lot of kids right now are saying like the weeks are so routinic. So it's like you wake up, go to school, do homework, go to sleep. So it's like every day is the same, but with like Wednesdays, it kind of eliminates the routine feeling, because teachers maybe one week will do synchronous and then the next week they'll do like a synchronous check-in, but then just assign work, or they'll do completely asynchronous the next week. So it's kind of like you don't know what you're expecting. Like some teachers have come out and say like we're going to do synchronous every single Wednesday, which is just one of my AP teachers. but most have switched it up every week that allows students to kind of, it kind of gives them a variety of each thing that could be going on a Wednesday. And the workload for me isn't that bad. It's just like, it's like kind of like a normal school day that allows like a variety that prepares us, like it prepares the seniors for college because it's responsibility while also holding accountability to our work.
Student representatives. Student representatives.
So for me, since most of my classes are AP classes, I usually have to meet every Wednesday virtually. So most of these classes are synchronous, and AP classes are on a tight schedule for exams in May. So most teachers want to meet just to go over stuff, because if they don't meet on Wednesdays, then they'll lose a lot of time. So if an AP class is not synchronous, usually the workload is really heavy, at least personally, up to an hour or more of work per class. And for me, like teacher days are much different from regular school days. And also I would like to mention, to put this into perspective, the 40 students on the principal advisory board were surveyed according to their opinions on teacher directed Wednesdays. And the following is a summary of the responses. 15% loved teacher directed days, 13% liked them, 25% were neutral about them, 38% disliked them, and 3% could not stand them. And as for hours of work for every Wednesday, they were pretty evenly spread out. So we have a third of students saying they had 1 to 3 hours of work per day, another third saying 3 to 5 hours, and the last third saying more than 5 hours. So a larger survey will be sent out this week to all students to get a group perspective.
Student representatives. Student representatives.
Okay, moving on, we're going to be talking about student morale, as in motivation, encouragement, and enthusiasm of students this past month. So I'll start off. Personally, I see a huge lack of motivation in my classes because students are doing class in their bed, turning their cameras off, or they're just not on screen. And in my classes, barely any questions are asked, and students barely participate unless the teacher directly asks them to. And especially for seniors, I think they're counting on college decisions. That's one of the only things they're looking forward to right now, but school is very difficult to get through. And I was talking to new students today, and apparently Mr. Murchis from LHS took the poll of his physics class, and he asked every student to rate their motivation levels 0 through 10 in the chat, with 0 being the lowest motivation and 10 being the highest. And apparently not one student said higher than a 4. So yeah.
Student representatives.
Yeah, I can add about student morale. Just talking about your senior year and how it's kind of disappointing not being in person, especially for sports. Everyone looks forward to their senior season on the field or on the court, and it's just super disappointing to not have that happen. And we don't know what's going to happen, and it's kind of the uncertainty that's getting at students as well. But obviously, right now, a lot of students are being forced to choose between sports, and that's a super tough decision for the seniors.
Student representatives.
Yeah, so personally, I've kind of been like the optimistic friend that's like saying like second semester, everything's going to be okay, and we'll kind of get the school the school experience or like go back to normal. But then as we approach second semester, kind of not really being pessimistic, but being realistic. Nothing that we're expecting second semester is going to happen. And that's just kind of like, although it's like reality, it's kind of like hard to accept because it's like you kind of like start forgetting how life was before COVID, and you start dwelling on like the past, which is just tough. And so I'm personally on like student council. So to plan events with so much uncertainty is just very exhausting. And just like, it's just like, it comes to a point where it's like, maybe you don't want to start planning these events because you don't know like if these can even be held in the future or what the future even holds. And that just doesn't really have to do with like the board and like hybrid and e-school. That just has to do with like, it's winter, it's just COVID exhaustion. Like even if we were in person, we still wouldn't be able to have like the assemblies or turnabout or anything that we normally would have in person. So it's just really hard to remain optimistic as of now because there's just nothing to look forward to at this point, which is just really frustrating. And then I'm going to bounce to finals. Dr. K talked to us today about the finals schedule and all that, but there's just so much confusion about what's going to go on with finals, how they're going to be administered, or if they're even going to happen. So I now understand what's going to happen with finals, but I think like students, like it's coming to a point where we're used to having finals before winter break. So something could be sent out to students being like, this is what's going to happen with finals. It's like teacher, like they can choose and all that. But I mean, personally, if I were to have a final, I think it's more like for survival. It's more for getting that A rather than it's for recalling any information because it's after winter break. And that's that's just January, which is like the hardest time normally, even during any school year for any student, because it's just like the dark days of winter, the heavy workload. And so it just would be like, it would help a lot and like eliminate all that confusion. If we could get some sort of like structure of like what's going to go on with finals, how it's going to be, and if like teachers could come out and say what's going to happen with their classes. But I personally don't think if I were to have like a final in my AP class, I don't think I'd perform as well as I normally would. So, and then I'm going to hand it back to Eva and Vernon Hills for the Vernon Hills student morale.
Student representatives.
Thank you, Amal. So to start off with our report, we wanted to speak about fundraisers. So National Honor Society hosted a fundraiser at the Vernon Hills Chick-fil-A on December 3rd, and the Vernon Hills and Libertyville High School Foundation for Learning fundraiser is Monday, December 14th at the Panera Bread in Vernon Hills from 4 to 8 p.m. And the VHHS educational support staff are hosting a fundraiser with City Barbecue in Vernon Hills on Tuesday, December 8th to support the ESP Senior Student Scholarship Fund. Feel free to enjoy lunch or dinner and support a great cause for VHHS students. We'd like to congratulate seniors Rahul Gupta and Cecilia Nam. They were named semifinalists for the 2021 Coca-Cola Scholars Program. From a pool of 99,000 applicants, they were part of the 1,609 high school seniors who were selected to be entered into the next round to potentially win one of $20,000 scholarships. To continue on to clubs, the Student Council's senior class is hosting a blood drive on January 8th at the Vernon Hills High School. If you're interested in donating, sign up. Links will be sent in the following weeks through email. And starting tonight, the Academic Resource Center continues to be a vital component of e-learning as always. And starting today, students are able to virtually access the Resource Center online, which we're calling evening hours, and it'll be available Monday through Thursday from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Tutors and teachers will be available during these hours, and it gives students an opportunity to work on classwork or upcoming projects with teachers towards the evening hours when students usually work on their work. And throughout the semester, clubs have utilized Zoom calls to host meetings and social media to push out information and stay connected. Voices in Prevention held a Zoom training session partnered with the Improv Playhouse of Buffalo Grove. This training session gave Voices in Prevention members the opportunity to learn about the art of improv acting and a chance to practice it themselves. Clubs such as Environmental International and FMPA have utilized social media to remain engaged with members and to get more students involved. Through this platform, clubs have been able to play games such as bingo and post flyers about upcoming events or meetings in hopes of recruiting new members. Now on to Kayla.
Student representatives.
Thank you, Eva. Okay, VHGive occurred last week. Students were able to reach out to the teachers and loved ones to ask them what they're thankful for. The responses were filmed and students posted on the responses on social media with hashtag VHGive. Over 140 staff members sent videos to countless students. JSA, this Tuesday's meeting will involve a debate with the Green New Zealand. Previous week's meetings have included a collaboration with Naperville North Chapter, various thought talks, and a debate workshop. Libertyville Social Studies Department Chair Mr. Voss as a guest speaker, and a few debates as well as Science Olympiad. Science Olympiad won their division in Palatine invite on November 21st. Our students earned first place Illinois Palatine High School Invitational District Division C AA teams. The overall scores are VHHS Team 1, 135. Our students earned first place in the events for Evan Shao and Jackie Liu for Sound of Music, Evan Lee and Alan Lee in Right to Do It, and Hannah Kapoor, Via Verma in Eshu Chikoki, I'm sorry, I'm saying that wrong. Protein modeling. Sponsors, Nicole Collins and Young Choi. Sports, Special Olympics. Several of our Olympians participate in virtual events for soccer and football. D128 had a number 11 gold, number 10 silver, and number 4 bronze athletes. Senior Casey Crappy signed with Northern Arizona University to continue her swimming career, and senior Jordan Smith signed with the College of Lake County to continue her softball career. Best of luck to our fellow seniors. Last week, the boys swimming and diving team completed their 4-day canned food and non-perishable grocery diet to benefit the Vernon Hills High School food pantry, along with other food pantries in the area. Altogether, their team collected and donated over 2,600 items. A special shout out goes to varsity swimmer Devin Mulgrom, who has led his team of 6 individuals to an inter-squad victory and collected over 900 items. Academic. Student Mr. Lucan's advanced topics in computer science data structures have created a program to analyze local COVID data. They're working with Dr. Grody to create custom analysis and predictions based on the current data. Great book. The semester teachers have been flexible with grading. Teachers have offered opportunities for students to complete makeup work or retakes. Currently, teachers are adding zeros into the grading book for incomplete work, with hope that when a student notices a change in their grade,
No audio technical difficulties.
Kayla, it seems like you've cut out there for a second. Would you just nod if you'd like me to pick up for you, and then the moment you're ready to jump back in? Okay, I'm just gonna. She was saying.
yeah, fine, go.
Oh, you're good. Please go ahead.
Student school board rep.
Oh, you can go, Diego. It's fine. You can read the rest of it.
Okay then. As teachers continue to assess their students through quiz and tests, some teachers choose to assign these assessments asynchronously. In math classes, teachers ask students to submit a photo of their work. This gives math teachers an opportunity to provide feedback to their students and to give additional points. This has also been seen in various STEM classes as well. Obviously, doesn't really translate that well to the English and social studies departments, but I myself have experienced tests where I'm not allowed to be on Zoom on my test-taking device. I actually have to have it on my phone, propped up like that, just for making sure everything's nice and clean. And that also just gives teachers and students that sense of security that there's fairness for everyone going all around. In terms of finals, they're going to be looking a bit different compared to previous years. Teachers aren't holding finals for most classes, but some classes, again, mainly those STEM classes such as pre-calc, macro, even lifeguarding are holding finals that are going to be taking place after winter break near the end of this first semester. Some teachers that aren't choosing to hold a final are opting to assign one at the end of the semester project, or choosing to assign a semester project instead. I haven't seen that yet across my classes, but I do believe some of my social studies based classes are going to be doing that and will handle that really well. Across the board, students are happy that they don't have a final, shocker there. But on the other hand, many students are stressed because they either have a final in one of their hardest classes, and being COVID, prepping isn't just the same as if they were in person, and finals are just after a long winter break, and you worry about losing content or you worry about having to just focus on that content during your break. For the 2022 to 23 school year, 85% of colleges have chosen to be test optional, and almost all schools have gone test optional this year. With that said, there's a lot of subtle pressure to test in two of the most competitive programs. Schools clearly advertise their median admitted student testing stats and how many applicants overall or per program they're receiving. Those two things put a lot of pressure on students to test. Beyond that, actually testing can be a major challenge. I myself had 2 December 5th SAT exams canceled and ended up having to go to Indiana to take it. Many other students are in a similar situation, ending up forced to submit older scores, super score previous exams that they were just iffy about, or just not submit their ACT and SAT scores. Furthermore, due to COVID, students couldn't add on to their portfolios and resumes last semester, over the summer, and during the school year with whatever activities or leadership opportunities they had planned. This just puts more pressure on us to test, or just worry about the nagging sensation that if we aren't testing, even though they say it's okay, that we're just hurting our overall application profile. With that said, there are some more unique cases that have popped up throughout this whole process. One of those cases actually being Kayla and her personal story.
Okay, so I was born in the state of Florida, which has a prepaid college fund program. This allows parents to lock in their price when they register to what their average cost of the 4-year degree at a public university cost that year. I was born in 2003. My parents locked the cost for 2003, and I've been making payments towards this since then. I'm only applying to colleges in Florida, and all of them haven't adopted the test optional policy. This is because Florida has been going back to school in person since August. Most ACT and SAT tests were not canceled, while when they have been canceled here, the only places with ACT and SAT are in Indiana. I'm not going to Indiana, nor am I going out of the state because my mom is high risk. I took the test one time a long time ago where my anxiety was at a high, and now it's better, but I didn't do great on it. Now colleges have that same score if they completely need to, and now they're only comparing that one score to my academic.
No audio technical difficulties.
Lost you.
She was almost done. She was going to add that while there's nothing she can do about that, she only hopes and prays that overall her academic portfolio isn't just going to be reflected by that one score. And I didn't know this about the Florida situation, that they mandated the tests. We actually talked about that earlier. After that, I reached out to a couple friends of mine who I knew had prepaid setups in Florida as well, and they were in similar situations to Kayla. She's not the only one. It's really common, and that just must be really frustrating. I was going to move on to the fine arts area. Both band and orchestra and choir, all three are preparing holiday content to share with the community. That's probably my favorite concert of the year. I love playing Sleigh Ride, mainly Leroy Anderson. Both band and orchestra are combining multiple of their respective individual ensembles for this project using a software called Soundtrap, which I've talked about before, to capture the audio. And then as for visuals, that video is going to be included as well, and it'll all be put together into one massive final product for everyone to enjoy for each of those ensembles. You'll all be receiving information on that, and I hope you tune in with your families and just enjoy the holiday spirit. Each of those three groups and their ensembles are also still working on their own separate repertoire, using Soundtrap, using other softwares, and there's always work, always busy, so fine arts still remains strong even with the COVID circumstances. Band and orchestra have beat the uncertainty of senior solos taking place and have confirmed an audition date for this much anticipated event. I myself have been waiting for my shot for 4 years, and I'm really excited to have a chance to play one of my concertos with my ensemble, even if it'll be virtual and cut up. Now, as for theater, there were auditions this past Thursday and a play called Party Hop, which is written in October. This is a play about a fictional future where lockdowns and COVID remain the norm, and follows the life of a group of students as they live their lives and experience this new reality. Shamefully, I usually don't tune into theater and all that too much, but this just sounds really exciting, and I can't wait to see what they have to present. And then one-act auditions are tomorrow and are going to vary in the subject of each individual play, but they're all student-directed as always, and that'll be all for me. Actually, overall, I think.
Yeah, if we can switch back to LHS real quick. For athletics, while most sports have been put on hold, we have a few sports that are training in person and virtually. To highlight a couple sports, the dance team was supposed to have virtual and in-person competitions, but that was unfortunately canceled, and now everything has been moved to being virtual. The pool is open for the swim team, but has a limit on the number of people that can be there and has limited the frequency of practices. Additionally, they have at-home Zoom workouts, and varsity swim captain Thomas Evans states that this time has been pretty challenging for all the teams affected by the suspension of in-person sports. Boys swimming and diving has shown great persistence with showing up to virtual workouts and participating in team events. Our coach Mike is trying his best to get us back in the pool as safely as possible. And we just had our boys swim and dive food drive, where team members were able to pick up hot chocolate and donuts while also giving back to the community. Finally, cheer is all on Zoom, and they hope to find a way, virtual or in person, to compete during the upcoming season. Sports that are unable to practice are still finding a way to do things together as a team. For example, the soccer team is participating at Toys for Tots Drive this Tuesday. Coach Dunham has over a dozen gifts for the children, and soccer players are bringing gifts as well. And to wrap up athletics, I think the Bears need to fire Matt Nagy. To move on to Green Dot, Green Dot is hosting their first in-person training, hosted their first in-person training this past month. Junior Emma Bleck said, "I feel really lucky I was able to have this experience of Green Dot training while remote learning. Even in a socially distanced environment, it was still so much fun, and it was a really cool experience for all of us. Thank you to Dr. Nelson for all you do for Green Dot." And that's it from me.
Hey, Quinn, at least we can celebrate the Irish are undefeated. Okay, anybody else?
So moving on to fine arts. We had a radio play, It's a Wonderful Life, and it occurred on December 4th and 5th. And senior Julia Munoz stated, I played a role as a walla ensemble, so I didn't have a big part, but it's still fun to see how everything was put together. I thought it was a great experience to work with new people and see how everyone was handling times during this pandemic. There were days where people would go and record in person with social distancing, and for someone who isn't experienced in theater, I had a fun experience and felt very comfortable with recording days in person. And there was another winter Zoom play that happened on November 19th and 20th. It was based on a collection of stories from the cast members' lives. Students shared their stories and idea as they crafted 30 plays on their own. They mentioned that they witnessed vulnerability, creativity, and boldness while sharing their experiences with one another. We commend their collaboration with each other as we push through these virtual times, and their abundance of creativity is highly respected, and congratulations on another successful production. With the spring musical track approaching, theater students are preparing for auditions due the 15th. Since students cannot audition in person, they must make a video of them completing each part of the audition. This includes singing, dancing, and acting. And callbacks most likely will not happen since the cast list is heavily dependent on auditions. And as of now, all rehearsal will still be on Zoom. A student who participated in the winter Zoom show stated that she is feeling anxious and hesitant about trying out the spring musical. She emphasized the difficulty of being in Zoom classes all day and then having to be on Zoom rehearsal for another 2 hours following the school day. Moving on to LHS True Wildcats, congratulations to the 18 students who were nominated in November LHS True Wildcat. For the month of November, these students were freshmen and seniors, and for December, they will be sophomores and juniors. This month, the LHS True Wildcat ceremony was a little bit different because these students are also our East School All-Stars. And these students stepped up to make school a positive experience for the class. They represent encouragement in these challenging times, whether it be helping students out, actively engaging in class, or going out of their way to make sure everyone has a positive virtual experience. So thank you for your constant efforts and congratulations again. For math team, the LHS math team participated in the third North Suburban Mathematics League Conference competition of the year on Wednesday, December 2nd. Juniors George Huber and Nicole Patel wrote perfect papers on the topic of advanced probability, and freshman George Blue also wrote a perfect paper on the topic of probability. Congratulations to these students. Senior Richard Xiao says that everyone is enjoying the math team despite everything being online, since the math team is able to operate virtually. He also said that online competitions are kind of strange and that there's a level of honesty that plays into them. People also may have a hard time staying motivated since online work can be really tedious, but overall, he says everything seems to be running smoothly. And as for NHS, we had newly inducted National Honor Society members, and it's amazing to have LHS's largest service group grow. All NHS members are still expected to participate in 8 hours of service for the first semester, but there are still many ways to earn service hours. For example, many students have been going to Feed My Starving Children, Bernie's Book Bank, or volunteering online. There's also tutoring. Amal earned her service hours by campaigning for a local candidate on November 3rd, and both Quinn and Amal helped tour freshmen throughout the school. And I am a charity runner for the 2020, but now 2021 Chicago Marathon, and I'm fundraising money for Advocate Condell Hospital's 101 Center. And the NHS Executive Board is doing a great job helping seniors come up with service ideas, and seniors have been working hard to help their communities during this time. Whether that's through Letters of Love, the Lake County Haven, the food pantry pads, there's so many ways seniors can give to their communities. So thank you to seniors. And that's all from me.
Thank you, Marilyn. All right, anybody else? Amal?
Yeah. Okay. The 2020 canned food drive at LHS was a huge success. Stuco collected 4,489 cans and raised $3,000. Thank you to all LHS students, parents, and community members for coming together and helping others in a time of need. Huge shout out to Senior Board for hosting the Cluckers Foundation and raising $300 for the Libertyville Township. To safely spread joy this winter season, Stuco is hosting the first ever Secret Wildcat Initiative. This fun activity was made to provide optimism and light to students during a difficult time and to remind them to persevere even when it's tough. This activity allows kids to sign up and be paired with a member of the grade that they then will deliver or send a winter surprise to. The Secret Wildcat item can be encouraging messages or cards, handmade crafts, or anything that is individually packaged. As of now, 61 students have signed up. Thank you, Stuco, for continuing to shine through and provide joy to so many students. Stuco is also hosting a 12 Days of Winter giveaway on the Instagram. Giveaway items include gift cards, old Stuco swag, and more. Again, thank you, Stuco. When thinking of December at LHS, the first thing that comes to mind is tables of hot chocolate, marshmallows, and donuts surrounding the perimeter of the cafeteria on a cold Friday morning that always ended up in a race during first period for the extra donuts. Students were so excited when we were all told that Parent Cats, along with LHS teachers and staff, were still hosting Hot Chocolate Fridays, drive-through style. This will be ongoing through the month of December. This past Friday, students were able to drive through and pick up a cup of hot chocolate along with muffins. As if it couldn't get any better, students were also greeted by Coco, the hot chocolate horse. Coco brought a smile to so many of my classmates' faces, and although I didn't get to pick up hot chocolate on Friday and meet Coco, I can't wait for next Friday when I do. But it doesn't stop there. On December 18th, there will also be a Polar Express hot chocolate train running that allows students who are unable due to any circumstances be at school on Friday morning. Everyone's going to get a chance to meet Coco. More details to come. This Wednesday between 8 to 10, seniors are invited for a drive-through breakfast where coffee, hot chocolate, and donuts will be provided by Dunkin' Donuts and Conscious Cup. Thank you, Parent Cats and LHS staff again for allowing this to happen. This week from 7 to 8 p.m., a few teachers have volunteers to help students if they are needing any help in math, science, or English. It's like the Mash and Write place, but at night, giving students another resource to take advantage of. Thank you to the teachers who are facilitating this. This is amazing and such a good resource. The winter season at LHS also includes Wish Season, a time where LHS students and their second period classes raise money for a family in need and buy them presents. Even though we aren't in school in person, many LHS students and their friends came together to continue this tradition. These students use their own money or fundraise to purchase presents for kids whom are less fortunate. A group of seniors did a Lolo's Bowl fundraiser where they raised a ton of money for their Wish family. Makes me so happy and grateful and proud to see my classmates come together for the greater good of the community. Quinn, Marilyn, and I were able to adopt the Wish family ourselves and drop the presents off just a couple hours before this meeting. It was so awesome and inspiring to see the lines of presents throughout the warehouse. Seniors have now moved on to the very stressful waiting phase. The month of December is an important month for seniors as early action admission results will be released throughout the month. Most of the admission results regarding early decision will be released on December 15th, which is the one I'm personally waiting for. Good luck to all seniors, and I'm so excited to see what the future holds for everyone. And that concludes the LHS and BHHS December Student Board reports.
All right, great job, you guys. Hang in there. I know it's been very challenging for you, so we appreciate your feedback, and thanks for all you're doing. Okay, next, yeah.
Yeah, before we move on, just we want to clarify one thing about swimming. Brian, do you want to make a comment about swimming?
Brian Kelly, Associate Superintendent.
I know the comment was made, I think Quinn mentioned that swimming was, practicing in the pool. There's open lane swimming that is allowed by IDPH. So Illinois Department of Public Health allows one person to be in each lane. And so just to clarify that, although the sports have, been shut down, that has been allowed for open swimming, one in each lane. So
okay, all right, yeah, thanks, Brian.
Just that clarification.
Yep. Okay, next, superintendent search update. So the board has been working very diligently on finding a replacement for Dr. Lee. We're working with a well-known superintendent search firm. They have conducted a national or nationwide search for candidates. They had 13 candidates apply for the position, a very strong number. from which there were 8 candidates that were vetted and screened and then forwarded to the board for further consideration. We've interviewed those 8 candidates, and we've narrowed the list down to 3 finalists. So we will be conducting interviews with those 3 finalists here this week. And we will be working then to complete the process between now and probably no later than early next semester. So we've got a great slate of candidates. I think we're all very encouraged. We had some great conversations in our first round of interviews. So look forward to completing that process over the next couple of weeks. All right. Next, superintendent's report.
Prentice Lee, Superintendent.
Thanks, Pat. Just a couple of good news reports that may have not been mentioned tonight. Former Drops of Ink staff member and 2020 LHS graduate Ian Cox finished 4th in the Designer of the Year category of the National Scholastic Press Association 2020 Awards Portfolio of the Year competition, and the Best of Show Awards given at the competition, which recognized work done so far this year. DOI member Amal Hassan received 8th place in photojournalism for her photo of a student signing the handprint mural. Congratulations, Amal. Last week's Palatine Invite, the VHHS Science Olympiad team placed 1st in its division. Team members received 3 first place honors, 4 second place honors, 3 third place honors, 3 fourth place honors, and 1 fifth place honors. The team is coached by head coach Nikki Collins and assistant coach Jan Choi. So congratulations to everyone. And the students mentioned the LHS math team and their success at the North Suburban mathematics meet. So next on the superintendent's report is just a quick round the horn on capital projects and where we stand with those. So Dan, I don't know if you or Mark are going to do that, but if you want to do a quick summary of where we're at with those projects right now.
Mark, you want to do that on construction progress?
Sure. Okay. Over at Vernon Hills at our additions in the academic wing, this classrooms are under punch list items, and the STEM lab, they are finishing it up. We will be doing a punch list walkthrough tomorrow for the STEM lab. In the cafeteria area, they're still working on punch list items. And in the gym addition, the dance floor is down. Cubbies are in the room, in the changing area. All the lockers are in the changing area. Few things, punch list items to go in the dance area. And the gym floor is down, and they're in the process of painting all the lines on the gym floor and getting ready for the finish. Exterior at the academic wing and around the new gym expansion is all completed outside. And that's an update for our capital projects.
Okay, great. With no questions from the board members, we went in detail on this on the facilities and finance meeting at 6 o'clock tonight. So before we go into hybrid learning, I just want to echo Pat's comments, and I think Dr. Colentis and Dr. Gilliam know and are thinking the same things. We sure hear how tough it is for the students, not only with COVID fatigue, but to continue in the year with the realization that some things are likely not going to happen. But I will tell you this, you are all doing a terrific job trying to stay focused and doing other things to move beyond that. So I just wanted you to know that, you know, we hear that struggle and we feel that pain you're feeling as we kind of go through this together and we get deeper into the year. And of course, as we kind of get into the dark days of winter. So we'll continue to work with each other, support each other, and move through this as best we can. So we appreciate you sharing kind of how you and the students are feeling at this point, because it's important for us to know that. So thank you for doing that. Okay, so the next section on the superintendent's report tonight is hybrid learning opening. And we have our regular components, if you will, but we're going to focus on several of those tonight. But before we do that, we want to review several things, perhaps for the audience and also for the board the administrators and the student reps here. So at our last board gathering meeting, the board voted to accept an administration recommendation that would have the staff return date on Monday, January 4th. Staff Professional Learning Hybrid Transition Day will happen on Wednesday, January 6th. And so there will be no student classes that day. The teachers will be engaged in preparing for the coming crossover to hybrid learning. And then the student return date is Tuesday, January 19th. So we want to spend some time tonight, both Pat and I talking, doing our normal metrics review, and under health and safety, particularly giving an update on where we think we're at with vaccines right now. And then we want to spend the bulk of our time tonight talking about diagnostic screening testing. So Pat, with that, I'll turn it over to you first if you want to bring up the presentation and maybe start with the metrics, and we'll move forward from there.
Pat Grudy, President.
Pat, we still have you on mute.
Yeah. Brian can bring up the presentation, and we're going to go through metrics very, very quickly. And I'm showing basically the same data that I've shown over the last couple months. So the first two charts actually just show the incidence rate and the positivity rates for Lake County. This was, of course, the spike that we saw earlier in the month. Previous slide. That's okay. We'll stay here. All right. These are our local data. Here's Lake County, of course, in the blue line. Again, Libertyville and Vernon Hills continue to do better than the county as a whole. And again, the good news from our early to mid-October spike is the data has continued to trend downward, which is very good news. And we are certainly hoping that that continues and doesn't spike up after the Thanksgiving holidays. Next slide. Still firmly in the remote region of the criteria. Likewise, the same trend on the positivity rate. Again, this data is significantly behind schedule on the Lake County website. So I do have an updated chart with data from the Daily Herald database. Next slide. Likewise, Vernon Hills, again, also doing significantly better than Lake County, and also following the trend that we see in Lake County and really in other parts of the state where the overall incidence rates continue to decline from their peaks of earlier in November. Next slide. And this is positivity data, again, up until the middle of November. So still significantly behind schedule. And then one more slide on these. This is the updated data that goes through today. So you see Libertyville actually has been spiking here a little bit over the last week or so. Vernon Hills continues to decline. And Libertyville still, it's running about 9% on the 7-day average positivity. I believe Vernon Hills is down closer to 5% at this point. So Vernon Hills currently operating in the moderate risk category, Libertyville currently operating in the substantial risk category. So we'll obviously continue to monitor this over the next days and weeks ahead. Next slide. This is actually just the Lake County and McHenry County. Again, Lake County and McHenry County combined make up Illinois Region 9. So you can see earlier in the week, actually, or last week, Lake County was running about 11.5%. And we still do see the Region 9 metrics somewhat biased by slightly worse data up in McHenry County at almost 15%. Next slide. And again, both of our communities doing, I would call it significantly better than those. So the weighted average positivity in Region 9 then was 12.3%. We see that is actually starting to come down on this graph. This really shows the hospitalization data. So this was the 20% threshold, the dotted line, which is really the critical number. You see early in December, actually across Lake County, we dipped below that threshold. So that's a pretty important metric. It means there may not be enough, in this case, med surge beds in the hospital. There still seems to be a sufficient quantity of ICU beds, but these numbers continue to be watched fairly carefully. Good news is over the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days, hospitalizations have continued to decrease. So that's, of course, good news, and we certainly hope to see that continue. Next slide, if there is one. All right, and again, I'm showing the trending data here. We really want to kind of drop to the bottom. This is the new case rate per 100,000. And again, the target was 50 or less. Lake County's currently running at 448. Still doing a lot of testing, just slightly less than what we reported 2 weeks ago. Test positivity, we talked about. Lake County's at 11.6%. COVID-like illness ED visits are down slightly from 2 weeks ago, from 13.6% to 11.1%. The number of hospital admissions for COVID also down slightly from 183 to 168. Unfortunately, the number of deaths has increased actually from 19 to 26. Okay, so on several fronts, I think the metrics locally have continued to improve. They're still in a not so desirable range. We still need to be very, very careful and continue the downward trend we're seeing in a number of those metrics. So to everyone in the community that's been working hard to help with that, please keep it up. It's very important. And we'll just continue to report these as we go forward. All right. Right now, there's nothing that we're looking at that in any way, shape, or form is changing our decision to go hybrid or return to classes on January 19th.
And Pat, just to reinforce with that,
I forgot it. So go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go. Finish.
So again, this is just one more piece of data. The data in the tables and the data in graphs is really the same data. But this is also very encouraging news from that spike there in the middle of November. These are school age cases across Lake County. So not specific to our two towns, but all across Lake County. And the good news is they have come down substantially from their peak of more than 300 if you look at the 18 to 22, and if you look at almost 300 actually in our school age population between 12 and 17 years old. So again, a very favorable trend that we hope continues, and that we hope we don't see a spike after the Thanksgiving holidays. Go ahead, Prince. I'm sorry.
Oh no, Pat. Or is that's our last?
I think that's the last one.
Okay, thanks.
My mistake. There aren't any outbreaks in Lake County or McHenry County. 13 across Illinois. I do think that is the last one. I apologize.
That's okay. I'm going to give us some time to run that up. Okay, we good?
Practically Superintendent.
All right. So before we talk about diagnostic screening testing, just an update on vaccines. As the board is aware, the superintendents of Lake County are meeting with the executive director, Mark Pfister from Lake County Health Department once a week, and for 2 weeks in a row. And I'm sure we're going to hear very similar information regarding vaccines that the Lake County Health Department is hearing from the Illinois Department of Public Health, who is, of course, working with federal officials. It still appears that the phase 2 vaccinations at the top of that list will be school employees, which is good news, and that will probably be a March to April timeframe. So I would just assume, for thinking purposes, probably April. And then the vaccines will continue to be rolled out from that point forward. So every couple of weeks as the board's meeting, I will update you on that as Mr. Pfister gets more information from the Illinois Department of Public Health. I will say again that several years ago, we signed on with the Lake County Health Department to be kind of emergency centers, if you will. And we have a memorandum of understanding with them. So we have followed that up and let them know that we would be happy to serve as vaccination pods for our school community and the communities at some point down the line. So I'll be attending a meeting here probably next week. I'm thinking that we'll be invited to get more information about that. So those are all good things. And again, we'll do everything we can from our end to help facilitate vaccinations in the community once that becomes available on a larger scale. And of course, it's really good news that school people are going to be, at the top of phase 2, which would be behind critical patients, senior citizens, first responders, hospital and healthcare professionals. Right behind that. So that's all good news. And so just as a lead into diagnostic screening testing, I'm going to turn it over to Pat again. We'll probably go back and forth a little bit here. Pat has continued to do really some incredible work for us behind the scenes. Pat and I together have been working with a third-party provider to see what our possibilities might be, a number of discussions on that. And we have some positive signs trending upward with some what ifs down the road that Pat will highlight as he walks us through the presentation. So Pat, with that said, I'll turn it over to you again, okay. And we'll walk through this and then, of course, discuss and talk about anything that we need to stop and talk about.
Okay. All right, next presentation then. Okay, so let's talk about the purpose of why we would do some COVID-19 screening in the high schools. First, an important point is it would provide us an additional layer of mitigation to ensure our buildings are safe to open for in-person schooling. And I want to emphasize that it is another layer of mitigation. It would not in any way replace or de-emphasize the other mitigations that we would have in place, including things like face masks, social distancing, and the other things that we've worked so hard to put in place. So it's very important to understand that, you know, getting a negative test is not a free pass to just go out and do whatever you want now. It's just one more thing we can do to improve the safety of our buildings. This kind of screening does help identify the asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic cases. All right, I'll define those as asymptomatic would be a person, let's say, that gets infected with the virus and never has any symptoms. And that does happen quite frequently, frankly. Whereas pre-symptomatic cases are those people who haven't yet shown symptoms, but eventually do actually develop the symptoms associated with COVID-19. To the extent that we can identify these, that can help significantly in controlling the spread of COVID-19, not just in our schools, but in our community as a whole. There are estimates that the asymptomatic, I'll call it asymptomatic / pre-symptomatic spread, it can be anywhere from 10 to 81%. At the end of the day, people don't know for sure. And one of the reasons we don't know for sure how much asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic carriers cause spread is we don't test them all. So it's impossible really to get good data on that. But I've seen reports where some people don't think they're significant carriers. Other people think as much as 81% of the cases could be spread by those people that have the virus, but we just don't know it. So the science is still sort of outstanding on that. But I think the general feeling is that there is a fair amount of asymptomatic spread. In fact, if you've seen any of Dr. Fauci's recent interviews, one of the things he's pushing very strongly for and expects to push the incoming administration on this is for the development and commercialization of home testing, rapid home testing for COVID, so that we really could, you know, significantly increase the amount of testing that's done in order to find those asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic carriers. So it may help drive down the overall rates of COVID in our communities. And I think it would also help us reduce our school closures once we open up, therefore allowing a more stable in-person learning program. All right. Feel free to ask questions as we go through this. We don't have to wait till the end. Next question, or next slide, please. All right, so what did we consider? We've looked at a whole bunch of options here. You know, one is certainly commercial PCR testing. So, you know, a lot of the universities, I'll take Notre Dame, for example, a lot of their testing was done with a commercial provider. So they collected the specimens and they sent them to a commercial lab where the testing was done. You may have heard about this so-called rapid antigen testing. There's been a lot of publicity about the Abbott BiaNAX NOW. It's a different technology than PCR, maybe not quite as sensitive, maybe not quite as specific, but the good news is it's relatively inexpensive and quite easy to perform. And there's also a program that I recently learned of that is out of the University of Illinois, and it really is the same test that they have used successfully throughout the first semester at the University of Illinois, and it's called the SHIELD Illinois program. which I'll talk about in more detail in a minute. So we looked at all these options. We looked at the cost. We looked obviously at the test performance. We looked at the availability of the different options. And also we looked at the ease of implementation. And I'll define that as the issues associated with sample collection, as well as other logistics issues with respect to implementing a testing program. Next slide. So the Abbott BiaNAX NOW test, if you're not familiar with it, it's a little credit card looking thing. And you can see on the pink and white card, that's actually a picture of the test itself. And you see a little blue line there, which is the control line. And then right below that is a sample line. So what happens when you have a negative test, the control line is blue and the sample line stays white. If you have a positive test result, you would get a line in the blue sample window there. So you would have two lines, one for the control and one for the test sample. They've got this tied up to an app. So conceivably the results are reported out, not conceivably, but the results are reported out by the healthcare provider. And your app actually then turns green, or I believe the other color is red. So some companies and schools are actually using this test and this approach almost as that's your boarding pass to actually get into the school or the office building. The sensitivity is about this based on a relatively small study when Abbott actually published its data in their package insert, which was what was approved by FDA. The sensitivity is about 97.1%. Typical PCR assay is usually around 99% or higher. Likewise, the specificity of this test about 98.5% versus, again, a specificity for a PCR assay is also generally around 99%. All right, specificity becomes important in a low prevalence population. What that means is that, for example, in this case, if you tested 200 people, you would probably get, if you tested 200 people with a prevalence of 1%, you would probably find 2 true positives. And you would also find, in that case, 2 false positives. All right. So in essence, you could argue that almost half your positives are incorrect. But those can always be resolved by doing confirmatory testing to make sure that a true positive is really a true positive result. Okay. It's relatively simple to do. Next slide. The Shield, Illinois test actually is a saliva test. In fact, I didn't mention the BiaNAX NOW test is actually done with a nasal swab. The Shield, Illinois test is a saliva test. So literally you would just deposit some saliva into some sort of collection device. Usually it's some sort of plastic tube. Then they actually send that to the laboratory. They heat it. They add some other liquid reagents and then put this into a small instrument. That instrument's probably about twice the size of a desktop computer. And in about 4 hours, actually, you get the result. All right, so it's a very easy test to perform, and also it has very high performance. I'll show you at least the specificity data for the test on an upcoming slide. Next slide. Okay, so this is kind of my summary of the options. Again, cost, performance, implementation, and availability. PCR by far the most expensive. Sort of 1+ here is it's kind of on the low end of what we would want to do. 2+ is it's kind of acceptable, and 3+ is actually considered stronger. Performance-wise, commercial PCR and the Shield, Illinois, which is also a nucleic acid amplification test, the performance of those is both very, very good. Call it state-of-the-art. Commercial PCR from an implementation standpoint, we could do it. I'm sure there are providers that would be more than happy to test specimens that we send to them, but the logistics to that would be, I think, prohibitive because we would collect specimens. We'd have to send them to a remote lab that might be in North Carolina or it might be in Utah. And generally speaking, the turnaround time there would be probably 3 or 4 days, if not longer. Probably no problem with availability. I think there's plenty of capacity in the system to do that. So, all in all, it's not, from an overall implementation standpoint, it could be done, but from my perspective, it is significantly cost prohibitive. A commercial PCR test is anywhere from $100 to $150, and that would just be cost prohibitive for us as a district. The rapid antigen test, you probably read in the paper that Abbott's actually selling their version of it, and that's one of, I think, multiple that will be available. They're actually selling it for $5. But I think all in, by the time you actually get somebody to actually collect the specimen, run the specimen, and do the work associated with that, it's probably closer to a $20 price point. So that's about $20 per specimen. The performance of an antigen test is not quite as good as a PCR assay. There are reports that say you can sacrifice a little bit of performance as long as you're testing frequently. So if you got infected yesterday and I test you today on an antigen test, my guess is that you're not going to be positive. Very unlikely you would be positive. In fact, you may not even be positive by a PCR assay. But a week later, as you get closer and closer to becoming symptomatic, it is more and more likely that you could be picked up. So the rapid antigen test actually may catch that case, but probably would not catch as many cases as an PCR or molecular amplification test. And I had that confirmed by the person who actually developed the test for U of I. He and I had a conversation last week, and he's got some data that actually shows that the data from the molecular amplification test is doing a slightly better job in picking up these asymptomatic infections. Rapid antigen would be relatively easy to implement, except relative to the Shield test, we would actually have to perform the test. So we would collect a nasal specimen and perform that test right on the spot within our own buildings. So we would have that complication. The challenge here is, frankly, we just haven't been able to get access to the kinds of volumes of material that we need. We are getting access to small volumes of material through our state and local health authorities. And we do have plans to use those for some of our diagnostic testing. But we have not yet identified a commercial way to get this test in the volumes that we would need. That doesn't mean that couldn't or won't happen. But so far, all of the production has been bought by the federal government, who is allocating it essentially on a population basis to states and local health authorities. All right. So right now, that is not something that we see that's viable between now and the beginning of second semester. Shield, cost-wise, is more than the antigen test. All in, we're probably looking at somewhere between $25 and $30 a test. So significantly less than commercial PCR, but slightly more expensive than the rapid antigen test. Performance comparable to the commercial PCR. The implementation, relatively straightforward in that we would not do any of the testing, number one. Number two, because it's a saliva test, that's a significantly easier sample to get than getting a nasal swab or a nasal pharyngeal swab. Not that there aren't some challenges with doing that, but I think that would definitely be easier than getting a nasal pharyngeal swab. And it's also quite a bit quicker. Availability. If I would have talked to you on Thursday, I felt really confident that this was going to happen by January 19th. One thing about the Illinois test is it is not what they call authorized yet by FDA, whereas in most cases, a commercial PCR would have what's called an emergency use authorization. And I know the Abbott BiaNAX Now has an emergency use authorization. The University of Illinois has not yet received that authorization. They have applied for it. They are working on it. They believe they will get it. But as these things go, they don't always go on the timeline that you choose. And as of Friday, when I talked to them, they were less confident that they would have this authorization by the end of the year. Okay. So what does that mean? That does not mean we could not use the test. It means that the Shield Illinois program's having to rethink a little bit their strategy and their positioning of this. But they're working towards, they're considering and working towards an implementation program that would, in essence, allow this test to be used for surveillance purposes, not for diagnostic use, but for surveillance purposes, with the possibility that that could change once they get their emergency use authorization. So that is what we continue to talk to them about at this point.
Pat Grudy, President.
Next slide.
Pat Grudy, President. Pat Grudy, President.
Okay, this is just some details on the Shield Illinois test, and there's some references here. So again, it's low cost. They're saying 2 to 3 day. They're actually saying next day turnaround. And I didn't mention it In this case, we would collect the specimen and then send it to one of their what's called CLIA labs. All right, and CLIA is just the organization that actually regulates commercial laboratories. So it would be run in a laboratory that's completely regulatory compliant. And the Shield, Illinois people expected they could turn around the results the next day. So imagine if it's Monday night and we get the samples to the lab Monday night, we would expect results on Tuesday. There are advantages in cost compared to, like I mentioned, PCR. Saliva test actually, again, makes it a lot easier to get the samples. And again, test is very, very accurate. So they're quoting 99.8 to 99.9% specificity. So that means even in 1,000 specimens, the number of false positives is very, very low. And even though they don't have emergency use authorization, they have tested over 900,000 students at the University of Illinois. And I'll show some results from that in a second. Okay. So again, it's not EUA approved. And if anybody wants a detailed technical information there's a reference provided at the bottom of that slide that will tell you a lot more technical details about the composition of the test. Next slide. So this is the U of I COVID testing dashboard. If you're a student there, this is what you look at. So here again, they've tested now over 950,000 specimens. Their current positivity rate is 0.51%. So that was today. Okay. So to put that in context, that is anywhere from 10 to over 20-fold less than what we're seeing across the state right now. The state, I think, is seeing somewhere over 10%, if I'm not mistaken. And this really is a true reflection, I believe, of their diligence in doing this testing at the University of Illinois. On the bottom chart, the blue line just shows the number of new cases. So again, they're very careful. They only count new cases in this chart. The orange line actually charts their positivity. So obviously what you see there is when they first started doing their testing, when students first came to campus, you see that big spike, the first third of the chart there. But once they implemented their program and combined that with rigorous contact tracing and quarantining, they were able to significantly reduce that spike and keep it there, even as COVID across the state has kicked up significantly in that latter part of really the beginning to middle part of November. So, I mean, I think this is very telling data that shows the power of being able to do this when you do frequent testing with good tests. They were testing, I believe, at an interval of about every 5 days in order to achieve this. Okay, next slide. All right, so this is what the program would look like. Again, it's administered by third parties. That would include samples collected at school by a company, a firm called Passport Health. So that's who we're working with to put together the sample collection program. And I should add, we have met with our building leadership and a number of people in both buildings to review this, and they're working hard to look at how we would actually do it. As with everything, the devil's in the details. But there are people looking at the details, that when during the day would we test, where would we test, how long would it take, or not test, collect specimens, how long would it take, how many people a day can we do, all those kinds of things. And then, as I mentioned, the testing would be done through the Shield Illinois program at a CLIA certified lab. Okay, so again, even though this test is not yet emergency use authorized by FDA, the testing would still be done at a CLIA certified lab as would be done for any FDA approved diagnostic test. It would be a confidential program. We would need consent for any students enrolled in this program. All right, and the cost would be proposed to be paid by the district. Next slide. Okay, as far as what happens after you get a result, if it's a negative test, you get an email that says you were negative, and that's it. If it's a positive result, and this is one of the details we really haven't worked out, what we're proposing is that if you're symptomatic and you get a positive test result, well, we're going to treat that as a positive. And so you're going to get a call from a nurse that's going to tell you that you had a positive COVID result. If you are an asymptomatic person, our proposal is that we would do a confirmatory test. And if that confirmatory test is negative, then we would conclude that that is a negative person and send them an email that says you were negative. Conversely, if the confirmatory result is also positive, then that person would also get a call from a nurse and it would be deemed a positive result. Under both cases, certainly the symptomatic person with a positive result would immediately be quarantined. If you're an asymptomatic person and you get a presumptive positive result, we would want you to quarantine until we get that second test result. If it's negative, you'd be allowed back in school. If it's positive, then of course you would have to quarantine. Next slide.
Pat Grudy, President.
So one thing I want to highlight, and I want to thank Mary for very quickly getting this survey result, these survey results. We sent a survey out around the middle of last week, and we asked people, we asked students, and we also asked faculty and staff, would you participate in a screening program if we provided it? And this is pretty important because if you can't get most of your people involved in this, it's probably not worth doing. Okay, in the letter, we did put that we would like to get 70% or more. Again, 70% is not a magic number. But if you do the math from 70%, if only if 30% of your people aren't doing the testing with a certain low prevalence of population, there should be very, very few cases in the buildings at any one time. And so that was the logic for the number. It's not a magic number. It's not an absolute number. The good news is, about 80% of our students said, yes, sign me up. And again, I imagine this was probably done by their parents, but that was a very good response. So we're very encouraged by that. We actually got, 1,236 responses. And keep in mind that each response, we asked each family to only respond once. So out of 1,236 responses, we represent probably significantly more than 1,236 students. But upwards of 80% said they would not only enroll in the program, but they would also share the data with us so we actually can know who's positive and who's not. Okay. On the faculty and staff side, even higher.
Pat, can I ask you a question?
Sure. Go right ahead, Karen. Yep.
So if 1,236 responses represents more students than that, that 81% number is of the respondents, not the total number of students in the school.
Correct. Yeah. The number of students could be higher. Now, I'm gonna preface that though by saying I have no way of knowing for all those who didn't respond, are they going to be reflective of this survey data, or are they going to be, I'll call it biased one way or the other? There's really no way for us to ascertain that. We have to kind of imagine that this is actually a pretty strong survey response. We would hope that this data is reflective of the population as a whole. But yes, Karen, there would be more than 80% of the students if everybody that responded positively here would enroll in the program.
Karen Lundstedt, Secretary.
And are you, okay, maybe you haven't gone to the second half of the student one yet, because it seems like if they don't share it with D128, then it doesn't really help us.
Yeah, I don't, exactly. I mean, I think most likely the program will be, we need you to sign up and share the data. Now, we have to think about what that means. I suppose a case could be made for if we provide the test result, the student and the parent's going to make the right decision and not come to school. So I don't know. Maybe my statement there is too strong. We'd have to see. In any event, the numbers are really close. I mean, I think it's 81.8 versus 79.6. It might be that in some cases, let's say we had a case where a person said, I want to sign up with the program, but I don't want to share the data. We might be able to follow up with those individuals, try to make sure we understand what the concern is, see if we can mitigate that concern, and hopefully everybody that's in the program would be willing to share the data with us.
Pat, and I think as you and I talked, if we do this and we launch the program, and it looks like it's successful, then the odds are we're probably going to have more people come around.
Yeah.
And say, yeah, I'll test my child. I'll let you test my child.
Yeah. We did this survey because we wanted sort of a quick pulse of where is the community and would they be supportive of this program? If it came back and only 30% of the people would do it, well, frankly, then it really wasn't worth, not just me, but more importantly, a lot of building resource time putting this together. And so that was what we were trying to understand. So I think based on this data, there's good reason to think the community is supportive of this. To Prentice's point, I think, now we can go back to the community as we refine this and really nail down the remaining, facts around the program and go back and I think do a better job of positioning the value of the program and why it's a good thing for, virtually everybody to do. I'm going to let Tom comment on this later, but I'm going to steal part of his thunder. New Trier, for example, has implemented a program. Their program actually uses a test that I think it's a saliva test also. I believe it's probably fairly similar to the U of I test. However, it's kind of a home brew test in the sense that there was a person within that district who's a microbiologist at Loyola Hospital. And so he's worked very hard with the school to develop the test, and they found a lab in a school somewhere where they're actually doing the testing. And that's for a high school down in LaGrange, and New Trier has actually gotten involved in that with them. But the good news is, if I understand correctly, New Trier has about 90% of their students participating. All right. So, again, I think that's a good precedent. In fact, the same program, the LaGrange program, was actually featured tonight on the ABC Evening News at 5 o'clock. So my guess is it'll still be on at 10 o'clock, so we can all get done by 10 to make sure we can send you out to go actually look at the news segment. But it was actually a good interview. They interviewed some students and they interviewed the person that actually developed the test, and students and everybody were very, very positive about it. I forget the exact number, but they have found it was about 0.3%, which is very consistent with other data that I've read. They found about 0.3%, which I thought was like 15 cases or so in their LaGrange population that were asymptomatic. All right. So there are other schools doing this. New Trier is doing it. The school district in LaGrange is doing it. Glenbrook is doing something. On a national picture, New York City, I think, implemented it as a condition of their return to school. So more and more schools are really looking at this, and if they can afford to do it, if they can get access to the materials, they can get access to the personnel they need. I think more and more schools are really leaning towards doing this because it's a good thing to do.
And Pat, I think this data is pretty significant because when we did the survey, it was a relatively general survey without a lot of detail about what tests we would use, how we would implement it, and the structure we would do it. And I fully suspect as we firm some of that up, and we're going to talk a little bit about logistics tonight, as we firm some of that up, there's a cleaner picture for people too. So I would expect that these numbers will probably, they'll rise.
Yeah.
In real time once we actually lay out, if we go down this path, here's what we're doing, here's how it'll work, here's who we're working with, and I think those numbers will go up. So we'll see.
Yep. Okay, next slide.
Pat Grudy, President.
Okay, so let's talk about roughly what this means. And Karen, to your point, I think these numbers could be slightly even underestimated because of the fact that each respondent may represent more than one student. But if we assume we're getting about 35% of the kids in Vernon Hills in-person learning and about 70% of the kids back in Libertyville, and again, these are just kind of ballpark numbers. I assumed we had roughly 1,500 kids at Vernon Hills. I assumed about an 80% participation rate, a little over 400 samples a week we would need to do in Vernon Hills. And likewise, because the participation rate in in-person learning is so much higher at Libertyville, but using the same overall participation rate in the testing program, a little over 1,000 people would be involved weekly at Libertyville High School. And then I estimated round numbers about 400 faculty and staff a week. So we're really just south of 2,000 samples a week that need to be tested. Okay. So that's kind of a ballpark number of volumes that we need to do. All right. Logistically, what we've talked about is working with our provider to collect samples every day. And now we're looking at, okay, logistically, what does that mean? When are students in class? When are teachers in class? What would the workflow of that be in order to really get 400 people a week through it in Vernon Hills and 1,000 people a week at Libertyville High School, not including the incremental people with faculty and staff in both schools, okay? Provider thinks it's very doable. Generally what happens is you put 6 or 8 of these people in a room at the same time, all socially distanced with the right PPE. and collect a saliva specimen. And so our provider thinks they can do up to 480 samples a day on location. All right. So here are the cost estimates. We would, and again, this is not locked down in the sense that we don't have a signed agreement. My conversations with Shield indicated that they would charge $20 a test. Okay. The assumption there was that the sample was provided by us or our provider to the laboratory, and the laboratory actually would turn around the test. We've worked with our provider, Passport Health. They have communicated to us that they would charge us $7 a test in a medical services fee. This includes all the PPE. It includes all of the consumables, which is not an insignificant thing. It includes a physician-signed testing protocol, and it includes that they would actually then transport the samples every day to the laboratory. Okay, I know one of the labs in the area is supposed to be the Loyola Medical Center in Maywood. I think they're working on other laboratories in the Chicago area, as well as Rockford and some other relatively nearby locations. All right, they'd also provide the client education materials. All right. Their additional costs then would be for them actually to provide staff who would do the work. All right. So imagine you've got to actually register the students. You've got to collect the specimen. You've got to give them you got to actually provide them with a collection container. You've got to watch them actually deposit the specimen. Then you have to collect the specimen from them. And so they have plans to put a team of people, probably 2 persons per team, who would then work either school on any given day, again, with a capacity to collect up to 480 specimens. All right. So, that looks like fairly doable, given the volumes that I provided. Looks like something we could certainly do in a 5-day week. It's a little slower in the beginning as people get used to the process, but from what I understand, once people get used to it, it actually goes quite smoothly. All right. So
can I ask another question?
Sure, absolutely.
Would we expect that if we get this in place and know that it's a for sure thing before families have to decide for this, again, whether they're going to come back second semester, that the numbers would increase in coming back because they would feel more secure?
So that's a very good question, Karen. And I don't know. I could only answer it hypothetically and say perhaps, yes.
And Karen, what we don't know right now is if the availability of the test at the volume we need is going to be available at the time that parents have to make that decision, because they're going to have to make that decision before January 19th. And so we're not going to have testing in place before the holiday for sure, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. My next touch point with the people from Shield is December 18th. All right. They felt that hopefully by the middle of December, they will have a little more certainty with respect to what their implementation plans are. On December 18th, they may tell me, Pat, if you're willing to do the surveillance testing, we can have it up and running by January 19th. It's possible that they might let me know that they won't be ready by January 19th. We just don't have that certainty right now. All right, so what is that up to? Just roughly using the numbers that I gave you, assuming about $30 a test, which might be a little bit high, but it's probably pretty close. And even I did it on the 1861, which is the calculation I did. It could be closer to 2,000. We're looking at just under probably $60,000 a week to do this program. Okay. It would also require some initial investment. Rough number is about 10 grand for barcode scanners and computers, essentially, which you need to do to track the specimens and register the patients. The initial commitment to Shield, at least in their draft contract, was 5,000 tests. All right. So that really wouldn't be an issue for us if we got into this program at all. And then after fulfilling that commitment, if for any reason we wanted to cancel it, at least the draft language in their contract states that that a client can cancel within 30 days notice. Okay. So imagine we did the program in January and February. And for some reason, we didn't think it was, really adding the value that we needed to. We would likely have it out no later than March at that point. So those are ongoing discussions that we're still trying to work out. But we would not be committed to any long-term program if we choose the Shield Illinois program. Okay. Likewise, if we did BiaNAX Now, we would structure that with Passport. If we did BiaNAX Now, we would structure that with Passport to have them not only collect the specimen, they would also do the testing. And as I mentioned, that was probably in the 20 plus or minus dollars per test, plus the additional cost for the site fees, which are comparable to this program. The downside to that would be, again, you've got to actually run the test. And number two, I think the performance of this test is in fact better. Next slide.
Pat Grudy, President.
Okay, so my recommendation after all of that is to continue to pursue Shield, Illinois as the primary screening method. As I mentioned, there is some uncertainty there with respect to availability and their ability to support the program in the timing that we want. They know schools like us are really driving to implement something at the start of their second semester. And they have had many, many schools across the state actually contact them in the last couple of weeks. But I would continue personally to pursue options for BiaNAX Now as an alternative in the event A, it becomes available, and B, the Shield option is not available. Because I want to emphasize it's still a good option. I just think for a couple reasons. Number one, you're using saliva, and number two, it's a molecular amplification test. I believe the Shield Illinois option is a better one, even though it has not yet received its emergency use authorization. Okay, I'd say relative to the LaGrange or New Trier situation, which from a test perspective may be comparable, I think the Shield Illinois test has been challenged more. There's more user experience with it. They have 950 some thousand test results from the University of Illinois. So I'm completely confident that the test works. Also, it's going to be run in a CLIA certified lab as opposed to some makeshift lab, which is the case in some of these other ones. Not saying that those are bad options. I just think this is a better option. Okay.
Would we be asking for students who are electing to continue with e-learning but coming to school for extracurriculars to be tested, or give them the option?
Yeah, another good question, Karen, and it's a detail we do need to work out. But yes, for example, and Tom, you can, I think, comment on this better than me, but my understanding in New Trier, for example, is that they do mandate it if you are in an extracurricular activity, because that I think we can do.
Yes.
I think there's good legal standing on that. If you're playing a sport, okay, you have to be tested or you don't play the sport, okay? So I would imagine, again, I want to emphasize, we have not made decisions on that. Obviously, you guys know me well. I wouldn't be making that decision on my own. I'd want to make sure we have your input and buy-in. But I think that would be the right concept, okay? So that even if we could not mandate it for, to enter our buildings for school, I think we would have the opportunity to mandate it for people in extracurricular activities. With respect to mandating the testing for school, our best legal advice is that that is not something that we would be able to do. That doesn't mean that we couldn't challenge that finding. But I think looking at our relatively high level of participation, that's probably not a hill that we need to climb. Okay. I think the added benefit of doing that is actually relatively small. And we would be much better served trying to work with our community to inspire them to participate than to use a heavy hand in this case. That's my own opinion, and others may disagree. But
yeah, just if I can expand on that a little bit, I've gone back and forth with Len Himes as our chief legal counsel in the district, and just to review the concept, the difference between going to a K-12 public school and going to the University of Illinois, which is a public university, is that you apply to U of I, you get accepted to U of I. It's not required that you go to the University of Illinois. So in a K-12 public school, the concept is the students have a property right, and that property right can only be taken away for with due process and for a select amount of things. So for example, if a student behaves very badly in school, there's a whole set of due process that has to take place before you can remove that student. You can suspend the student, you can remove the student's right to attend school for a period of time. So the students have a property right to be in school. And at this time, testing is not part of any legislative package. So while we could go down that path using a rationale, for example, that we use for measles and maybe polio immunization, those things are contained in legislation. And so Lynn's advice is what we in the business would know is true, that if you go down that path, it's a lawsuit waiting to happen. It's a lawsuit waiting to find a home. And since the test only shows the status at the time of the test, parents or their attorneys could successfully argue that its limited value should give way to the student's property right to be in school. So it's a very, very tricky legal precipice, if you will, and one we're probably likely to lose at the end of the day. And I would concur with Pat's assessment, and we've talked about this, that if we're at 85% on testing, we're in a very good place moving forward. So some districts, I know New Trier and some other districts are considering, those things as well. But is that a hill you want to fight, that battle, and which is potentially a losing battle at the end of the day? So
Pat Grudy, President.
Okay. So the last thing I'll just say is, again, with respect to testing these asymptomatic populations, the prevalence rate is very much unknown. Okay. But you can imagine in our total population of just under 4,000 people, if we had a 1% prevalence rate, we could find as many as 40 cases that would otherwise be entering our building. I think on the low end of that, you would still be looking at upwards of 15 cases across our two buildings and offices. And I think that's consistent with most of the data I've read. However, I will share one other piece of data that I got. Actually, many of you know my daughter works at hospital at the University of Michigan. Their positivity rate in symptomatic people has increased to upwards of 19% in that area. So a very high number. And to me, it was very interesting. Their prevalence in their asymptomatic population is now over 3%. Okay, so that's a significantly higher number than I would have expected. I don't know if that's just the nature of the current spike, and they're obviously on the higher end, or what. But even if we only had a 1% population, again, we'd have almost 40 cases in our schools, and at least to me, that's a fairly large number. Yeah, so I'm going to open it up. I mean, let's talk openly about it. I want people to feel free to challenge it. Students, you can also chime in. It is obviously a significant investment. Let there be no doubt. So I don't want to, in any way, shape, or form, trivialize the size of the investment we would be making if we do this. The good news is we are in the very fortunate position of being able to make this decision. And we can do this if we think it's necessary. Okay. But I'm open to any and all questions from anyone on the screen.
Jim Batson, VP.
Pat,
yeah.
Something that came to mind. I know over the years and in different districts that the healthcare provider actually participates in some wellness screening programs and those types of things where they'll actually participate in things that will improve the health of the staff. And this would be for the staff. I just wonder if there's some opportunity there for them to get involved as some kind of support, whether it's, a funding support or something like that for this kind of thing. If it keeps people from the hospitals, if it keeps people from spreading the disease, I would think they would have an interest in that.
Jim, are you asking the question from the standpoint of could we find a source of funding, or are you just talking about a general wellness program?
No, find a source of funding from our healthcare providers in some way where they could help. Because if I want to get a test somewhere, I know you'd submit it through medical insurance and they would be paying for that, at least a portion of that test anyway.
Yeah.
But is there some way that they could help support at least the staff portion of this in the same way that they support a wellness screening or those kinds of things?
We can certainly check any and all options. I mean, to me, I think the better unknown right now is, what, if any, action will the Biden administration take? They've made a lot of comments about getting schools more funding for COVID. And, I think we need to have our eyes and ears to the pavement to hear what that means. Okay. And, for example, I know when I've had conversations with some people on this, we've talked about schools like in the northern part of Lake County where they're not able to make this decision as we might. And so there's part of me that says, you know what, there are some other lesser expensive options, something like the BiaNAX Now, which at least right now, for the first 150 million tests, the federal government paid $5 a piece for them. So really all you got to pay is the incremental test to actually have the test, sample collected, administered. So it is a little cheaper. But I would certainly hope that those resources can be allocated to some of those other areas, not only where there's a need, even more so than in our communities, but also a lack of resources to be able to consider it. Before we start to open it up, can I just turn over to Tom here for a second? Tom, can you comment on what you learned today from New Trier, from you and your team?
Yeah, absolutely. We had a brief meeting with staff members from New Trier, and overall, they're very positive about the experience and about their testing situation. They are testing once a week, and you are correct. The students who are mandated are students involved in extracurriculars. Other students, it is optional. New Trier they're right about 90% of students participating, and staff members are participating as well. The biggest value that New Trier felt of the testing was that it was identifying asymptomatic individuals. And in the first 2 weeks, it was, I believe, something like 25 students were identified who were, if I'm not mistaken, asymptomatic and would have otherwise been circulating through the buildings and things because they, doing the symptom self-check in the morning, they felt fine. They didn't have a fever, yet through this screening testing, they identified as potentially positive. So from New Trier's perspective, that was a tremendous advantage because as you're bringing students back in the building and staff, it's those asymptomatic individuals that don't know they might be carrying the virus who have the highest potential, I guess, to spread. And at least you're able to quickly identify those individuals and, within a day, get them out of the circulation.
Daniel Stanley Business.
Good. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Okay.
Could I answer to Jim's question?
Yep.
So just so FYI, anything that you do through like a wellness program or whatever, first of all, would only really affect our staff, not anything to do with students. Second of all, the way our COVID testing is structured right now it's for symptomatic people. When a test is ordered by your doctor, that's when it's covered and provided for. But then if there was an additional wellness or program or something that would provide anything, just a reminder that we are a self-funded insurance. We're in a pool of self-funded, so we pay for it either way. So even the tests that we're doing right now that are ordered by the doctor, like we pay 100% of those tests right now. That's something that was implemented at NIHEP levels so that if any staff member has a test or treatment or anything for COVID, all that stuff is 100% covered, no copay, which, will cost our plan, but we're self-funded. So just some bullet points around those
good point,
topics.
Dan. Yep. Okay. Are there other questions?
Don Carmichael School Board.
I'm concerned about the cost, but think about the impact that it has on the total number of cases in our community at large. This will bring down numbers across our community, which makes us a good partner. We're helping everyone by doing this.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that has clearly been the case, Don, at the University of Illinois. Okay. If you look at the Illinois data, I mean, there's nobody around that Champaign-Urbana area that's got the numbers that they do, and they attribute that to this rigorous testing. In fact, what I understand is even a lot of the local establishments are, asking to see they have an app that controls their thing, whether you actually have been tested or not. And so they feel they've been very, very successful. And I think with the recent spike, I mean, there's no way you could get to 0.5% if you weren't doing a really good job of screening. But to your point, it's a significant investment. Although I'll put it in perspective, it's just slightly more than what we usually charge in total fees. It's probably $450 plus or minus per student. Imagining we could test if we tested for, let's say, 4 months.
Well, and Don, just to extend your thought, which is a great, point. There's also a cost to us maybe starting and then shutting down and starting and shutting down and starting and shutting down. So it's hard to put a dollar value on that, but I think all of those things are, as Pat and I have looked at this, all of those things I think are tied into that and our ability to move forward. What we know from the cases that we've had in the district is Bryant has tracked these with our nurses, both the staff and the students that we have. Virtually nobody has picked up COVID here, right? It's all come from other places. So if we can slow down, Don, to your point, if we can help out in the community, our two communities, or the two townships that supply our our students here, then we are going to have an impact because then the kids are not, or staff are not going to bring it into the school, and then we become a super spreader, for example, moving forward. And so conceptually, Pat, just to highlight this again so people can have this in their mind. So we'd be looking at a 4-person team to man from the company, and we'd move from building to building. So a couple of days a week or 3 days a week at Libertyville, 2 days a week at Vernon Hills, just because of the numbers. And what we'll be working on is getting the kids and the staff into a routine. So what was recommended by Passport is that a student and a staff have the same time to test every week. So if I test Monday at 10 o'clock, I know that's my schedule, right? So I just go there like I go to a class and I get tested. And so what we're working at the buildings is on logistics of where would we house that? What space do we need? Where would we house that? And then we'll be working with Ole Stevenson and Andy Young and John and Tom and their teams about the optimum times or the best times, the least disruptive times to have kids go down there for that testing. So if you have kind of that conception, so if they use the gymnastics gym at Libertyville, for example, and they go down there and that's when they're going to be tested. After the team's done at the end of the day, as Pat noted, part of this deal is they have a courier service that they've worked with for years that will pick up the samples, take them down to Loyola, if that's the place, and then we'll know in 24, let's say 36 hours on the outside, the students and or the staff would know their results from those tests. So it's pretty much turnkey once we get done. The other thing I want to point out, if just in case somebody watching says, well, you have 2 nurses and you have a couple of assistant nurses, why can't they do that at school? Because they're busy full-time right now chasing COVID-related cases and contact tracing, and we don't even have students in the building yet. So we do not want to take them away from their normal duties, because they'll be even busier when we have students return to the building. So this is a local company, although they have 14 offices and they have a very wide footprint. This is a local company that actually has some historical ties to the district, particularly Vernon Hills High School at its outset for the first 5 or 6 years of the existence of Vernon Hills High School. So would really be a turnkey program. And as Pat has pointed out, not a whole lot more expensive than BiaNAX Now. The problem with BiaNAX Now is we don't know when we're going to have availability. It doesn't, as much as Pat has worked on this, it just doesn't seem like it's going to be viable for any timeline that works for us. Second semester, if we're going to try and do this. Did I miss anything, Pat, in there as a recap?
No, I think that's good. I think actually, just to clarify, I think he was talking about 1 or 2 2-person teams. So he may use 2, he may use 2 times 2, depending on what the need is on the different schools. But the other thing is, and you may read that I think the new Trier situation or LaGrange situation, you'll read a number like $11 a test. Okay. Well, keep in mind that doesn't include any of the resources that they've deployed to that to do things like collecting specimens, transporting specimens, and all that kind of stuff. So their all-in cost is probably, again, $5-6 a sample higher than than what we read there. That $11 is really just to actually get the sample tested. Still a little bit less expensive than the Shield program, but again, in this case, we get to use a CLIA certified lab, which I do think is important because it does speak to some of the controls they have in place to ensure a good result and things like that. All right, other questions? Lisa, Kevin, Casey?
Karen Lundstedt, Secretary.
Pat, I'd just like to say real quick, I'm sorry to, I appreciate your comments about those districts who are in the position, I mean, that they can't afford to do this. And I think this is just, as I'm listening to all this, and I'm so glad that we're looking into this. Thank you so much for all your work. It's wonderful that we have the resources, but boy, I mean, I bet most of you along with me have a pit in your stomach because the inequities just get bigger and bigger. And we're charged with looking out for our schools and our districts, but wow, this is just horrible.
It's clearly
horrible that we can do this and that,
it's clearly a case, Karen, where the people that need it most are the least able to make it happen. And
as it is with so much. Yep.
That is something
in
that
education.
I think we as a society really need to reflect on that and figure out what we're going to do about it.
Well, and I even wonder as an educational institution or as a board or, something to advocate for change for those who have suffered these inequities. I just had to say something about that. And you started it. So thank you for bringing that up. And thank you for all the work. That doesn't mean we shouldn't go ahead and do it. But.
No problem. On a positive note, one of the things I have heard and one of the reasons why we have had some difficulty with the BiaNAX Now is that the big issue is the availability of the tests. I mean, there's simply 150 million sounds like a lot of tests. But when you talk about you're going to test everybody in nursing homes every week, and then you're going to test everybody in schools every week, all of a sudden 150 million is like a 2-day supply. Okay. But my understanding is there's at least been discussion. I don't know the status of this, but there's been discussion of a pilot program in one of our northern Lake County cities that is one of our lesser, endowed towns. So they're giving serious thought to that and at least trying to do something to help some of our surrounding communities who aren't able to do that. So that conversation is taking place in a number of places for good reason.
And Karen, to your point, think about Illinois alone. We have over 850 school districts, right? So that's going to take state, but in order for the state to be able to help the local school districts to do that, it's going to take federal government intervention. So the way we do that is everybody watching this tonight that feels strongly about that, we contact our state legislators, and we also contact Representative Snyder, who's very supportive. I will tell you before you contact his office, extremely supportive on this issue because we've met with him on this. So we contact our congressmen and women and our senators, and we push them to make those moves. And that's the only way it's going to happen is if there's a very strong voice on that issue.
Okay, let me ask this question. Is there anybody opposed to proceeding? Because at this point, I'm going to need pretty firm direction at this point because of the amount of time left over. And again, I apologize. I could call you in a week from now and say, hey, there's been an indefinite delay and I don't know what we can do. But I'm going to assume right now that there may be a vehicle to make this happen in time. And if so, I'm going to need to know that I can go forward. So I really do. If anybody's concerned, have objections to the cost of program or anything, I'd just like to know now.
Casey Rooney School Board.
No objections whatsoever. I think that testing is a essential part of a comprehensive strategy to get our kids back in school and make sure they stay there by preventing any spread of COVID. So yes, it's expensive. Yes, we all have concerns about that, but I don't have any issues with us going forward with that.
Okay. Anybody else want to make a final comment? Otherwise, I'm going to ask Dan a question.
I agree with Casey.
Okay. Thanks, Lisa.
Pat, before you ask the question, I think, and let's talk about this for a minute, but I think what we would really like is not only authorization to continue, but if, we get a call in a week and a half that we can move forward with this, we would really need to do that. So we would need some authorization to allow Pat and I to work on that on behalf of the board if it's the scenario that we raised tonight. Perhaps, Pat, we could ask for authorization possibly up to the first 5,000 tests if we can make that happen. What are your thoughts, Pat?
So that is what I was thinking. The only thing I want to make sure is clear. If we end up authorizing, let's say tonight, putting in place a program that would cover at a minimum the first 5,000 tests, I wouldn't want to pull the plug on it at 5,001. All right. So I can certainly appreciate and would support that if we had a motion tonight to authorize Prentice and I to work with the building leadership to put together the details of a COVID screening program, okay, as outlined tonight, to cover the first 5,000 tests, we can do that. But I think we have to have at least an understanding that at the earliest convenience, when we get together again, we would then authorize at least the next wave of that program. Okay, it may not be until the end of the semester, but it might be for at least 2 months or something like that. Okay, because I would hate to, I don't want to put the building leadership through what's going to happen here and go out and buy the barcode scanners and all those things, only to find out after 2 weeks we're going to test once, and after 2 weeks we're going to quit. Okay.
And
So
Pat,
that would be my only request.
I think we can do that in January.
I think so too.
Authorization to move forward.
Yeah.
Based on the criteria that we talked about tonight, that would allow us to be first in line, if you will, on the U of I test when it becomes available. And then in January, we can come back and review and of course say, okay, we think it's going to be okay and we want to go longer.
Yeah. I mean, our best case scenario at this point would be that by the time of our January committee meetings, my update to you would be we're ready to go. And this is what's going to happen. Okay. And I think to do that, I need to have authorization from you guys that we can move forward. There's a whole lot of worst case scenarios, but they wouldn't be worth talking about tonight, because that means I'm going to come to you at the committee meeting and say, we still don't have anything yet. And that's possible. I want to be transparent that there are a lot of moving pieces to this thing on all fronts. Okay. And I can certainly shoot an email update following my hopefully December 18th conversation with the SHIELD people to at least have some idea whether or not at the January committee meeting, I expect to come in with a favorable report or not so sure. Okay.
So Pat, I guess, and then you asked Dan your question.
So that was really my question for Dan. What would be the appropriate motion we would make tonight? So I think we can ask for a motion, as I stated, which is to authorize Prentice and I to go forward to implement a COVID-19 screening program covering a minimum of, covering the first 5,000 tests, okay, as outlined in this presentation.
So moved.
Well,
Go ahead, Dan.
hold
Go ahead,
on
Dan.
1 second. Sorry.
I guess I should ask Dan.
Daniel Stanley Business.
So typically, right, when we're thinking about things that we are authorizing or asking the board to authorize us to do, we are specific, or we have parameters. So typically we are talking about, we're naming a vendor or vendors. So in this case, if you're talking SHIELD Illinois, or if it's University of Illinois, whoever that actual, meaning we're talking about a contract, we're essentially talking about executing or getting authority, giving authority for Prentice Pat to execute a contract with U of I, Passport Health. That would be a different contract that we would need to have in place, that with terms to it. So there's prices involved, there's terms and then conditions that we want to make sure, we've got those terms. So what it sounds like to me is it would be authorization to enter into agreements with University of Illinois, SHIELD Illinois, and Passport Health to run this service at an approximate cost of the $30 a test for, what I mean, up it or so. And if you want to put a cap, because essentially, like, it shouldn't be very easy for us to spend $1 million. So
No, I agree.
We should have some type of parameters like that, so that both the board knows and obviously for the community to know, like, what are you talking about in terms of committing the district's resources? So
Yeah, let me just make a couple comments. So first of all, by limiting it to 5,000, I mean, we're nowhere near $1 million. We're at about 150,000. But Dan, the only concern I have, I'm willing to make the commitment on Passport Health because I think they are our one game in town and they are a good game. The only thing I'd say is if I find out in the middle of January, or I'm sorry, the middle of December that Shield, Illinois is not available, but I find out that BiaNAX Now is available. As I said, throughout this, I think BiaNAX Now is a good option. All right. I'm not saying it's anything but a good option. I just think the other one's better. If the better option disappears because they've just decided they're not going to do it without their EUA and they're not going to get their EUA until March or April, then, I would like the ability to reflex to another option if it's there. If we're uncomfortable with that, I have no problem with saying, all right, we'll get a special meeting together and we'll have the conversation. That's fine. I can live with that. It's just going to be, again, something we're going to need to do quickly.
What if we set the parameters at number of tests up to 5,000 and a dollar amount up to $30 per test, giving us the flexibility to go with one of a couple different suppliers who might be available or might not be available.
Yeah.
But at least setting the parameters so that we set a maximum dollar amount, a maximum number of tests. I'm concerned with you as you are, Pat, that we're going to get in a situation where you're going to have to move quickly and to get a bunch of us together to make that decision when we know we want to move forward with this might be tricky and might put us out of the running.
And again, I'm willing to put Passport Health into that motion. That's because that is who we're working with and that is who we're going to try to finish this off with. And I'm fully confident they can do the job.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah, Prince.
Suggestion based on Dan's counsel here. Then if we said Passport Health and we said Shield, Illinois and or BiaNAX Now, because the BiaNAX Now test we believe is going to be less. So if we did an either or but used the $30 per times 5,000 tests, I think that covers us. That could give us the flexibility to flex to BiaNAX Now if Shield, Illinois is not available, or conversely, if amazingly BiaNAX Now is available.
Right.
Dan, that either or, would that work?
Daniel Stanley Business.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, I mean,
what I think is more important is really the idea of the dollar amount. That is a bigger deal, I think, in terms of what the authorization is, right? Because this is new, right? This is new for us.
No, this is new. Okay. All right. So we'll
Pat Grudy, President.
We'll make the motion to authorize Prentice and I, okay, or however you want. I mean,
okay, yep, that's good.
Let's just say me working with the District 128 leadership team, okay, to finalize implementation details for a COVID-19 screening program for the first 5,000 tests at a maximum of $30 per test, okay, working with Passport Health, okay, and either the Shield, Illinois program or the Abbott BiaNAX Now test.
That's good.
So moved.
Pat.
Okay. Yeah.
So here's what I want you to do. Change the administrative team to me so somebody on the administrative team is accountable.
That's fine. Okay. So we'll amend it to be Prentice and I.
Along with you.
Yep.
Okay.
I was simply trying to recognize, I know this is going to take a village.
Yeah.
Second is amended.
Okay, second. Is there further discussion? All right, roll call, please.
I'm sorry, who did second? Karen was?
Don.
Don, sorry. Okay, Batson.
Aye.
Carmichael.
Aye.
Rudy.
Aye.
Hessel.
Aye.
Huber.
Aye.
Lundstedt.
Aye.
Rooney.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. All right, thanks, everybody. I will keep you posted every step along the way.
As you always do, and I can't thank you enough for your efforts on this. Your dedication and your extra work and hours that you've put in since the spring has really been outstanding, and we are very grateful.
Pleasure to help. No problem.
If I may,
and
here,
I do. Go ahead. What was that?
I understand that I don't have a vote on this per se, and I don't understand like the financial implications of all of this. But not speaking as a student, more so speaking as the son of like taxpaying community members and being someone who hears what other parents say in their households, being a guest in their households. This effort that you're going to do, that all of you are going to do in pursuing whatever the most efficient option is here, aka the most expensive option potentially, is really not going to go unnoticed by all the families in the community. I mean, there's, as you all know, I mean, every time we hear public comment, there's so much polarization with opinions as to going back to hybrid and people wanting to do this. This can really level the playing field for everyone, because it can either give more of a concrete answer as to going back or not going back, and it's actual statistics and numbers within our community, not just people basing their opinions and their numbers off of other communities and other areas that have been tested. So this can really change everything, and it's really admirable. You guys are going in a really good direction with this. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks, Diego. Well, one thing I want to clarify, it's not our most expensive option. I can tell you the easiest option for us and for me to implement would be to call LabCorp and say, I'm going to send you 2,000 samples a week. Could you do it? And they'd say, yes, sir. And then they'd send us an invoice for $100 to $150 a piece. But it would get done. But to your point, I'm going to go on a limb here and say I don't know how this would work out, but I have a dream. And that dream includes that when we do this testing, we may find that we can get our numbers down low enough that at least we could even have a conversation between now and the end of the year about bringing people back. I mean, not just in our hybrid format, but maybe something even better than that. So don't quote me on that, even though I know I already am, because this is being recorded. But I think it's something for us to aspire to and at least imagine, with all of our COVID wariness, and we're wary just like you guys, I can assure you, we can at least imagine, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be great if? And I think this at least gives us a reason to start that conversation. Okay? Okay, thank you very much to all of our students and their great feedback tonight. You guys are doing a good job.
Yeah, on that note, thank you, everyone. It's essay writing time.
Yeah, please go.
Yes, yeah, we kept you way long tonight. You guys go. Thank you.
Best of luck. Thank you.
Okay, Pat,
it's all yours.
Yeah, those were the two critical things, or three critical things: the metrics vaccination update and the screening testing that we wanted to accomplish under our normal package tonight. So I'm going to move to FOIA request. We had one FOIA request this month. It was a commercial request. It was received on 11/12/2020. The response deadline was 12/14/2020. The requester was Tim Oliver, Sycamore Learning Company, tim@sycamorelearning.com. Information requested, directory information for all students, students' names, students' grade level, students' school name and email address. Follow-up was done by Brian Kelly and Carol Scoden. Request was fulfilled. Email addresses were not provided, and they are exempt per FOIA. And the response was sent on 11/23/2020. And so, Pat, just to keep us moving along, that concludes the superintendent's report.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much. All right. The consent vote agenda is listed. We looked at it earlier tonight in the committee meeting. Can I ask for a vote to approve the consent vote agenda as listed?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. You got that, Carol?
I got it.
All right. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Carmichael.
Aye.
Grudy.
Aye.
Hessel. Aye.
Huber.
Aye.
Lundstedt.
Aye.
Rooney.
Aye.
Batson.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries. All right. Program and personnel, Chairperson Batson.
Jim Batson, VP.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Grudy. We have a group of board policy updates for the first reading. We went through these in a committee earlier this evening in some detail. They're mostly some minor adjustments without substantial changes. I guess I could read these into the record. The policy 4:55, use of credit and procurement cards. 480, accounts and audits. 4:90, student activity and fiduciary funds. 4:270, employment at will, compensation and assignment. 6:20, school year calendar and day, 6:300, graduation requirements, 6:320, credit for proficiency, 6:340, student testing and assessment program, 7:100, health, eye, and dental examinations, immunizations, and exclusion of students, 7:140, search and seizure, 7:300, extracurricular activities, and 3:325, student fundraising activities. We will be reviewing these again in January at our Program and Personnel Committee, as well as voting on them then at the January board meeting. Any questions or comments that anyone wants to make at this point? No? Okay. We did have a few curriculum proposals for the 21-22 school year that we need to vote on. Dr. Fisher, is there any overview you want to give on these?
Rita Fisher curriculum.
Right. We do have 3 new courses, all of which are designed to really tap student interests and support our daring mission, pursuing fantasy literature in the 1 semester elective at Libertyville High School, a STEM capstone course allowing students to pursue independent research at Vernon Hills, as well as a World Languages Department at Vernon Hills, a Spanish language arts program that focuses on developing the language skills of both native speakers and students who have been immersed in dual language programs. And we have some minor name changes and requirement changes.
Okay, sounds great. Can we have a motion and a second for this one?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion, any questions? Again, these were reviewed earlier in committee, so we went through these in a little more detail. So hearing no questions, Carol, can we have a roll call, please?
Rudy.
Aye.
Hessel.
Aye.
Huber.
Aye.
Lundstedt.
Aye.
Rooney.
Aye.
Batson.
Aye.
Carmichael.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries, and that will be it for the Program and Personnel Committee.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Jim,
Yeah.
Jim, before I get going, talk a little bit real quick about the presentation that Rita gave or Tom gave, remember, and John gave. You were going to cover that real quick.
Yeah, thank you for that. We just as a point of reference under other, and thank you, Kevin, for reminding me. We did have a conversation earlier about some metrics, looking at student performance and doing some comparisons to see if we can identify any performance differences this year during remote learning versus prior years. And actually went through a number of support services and intervention services that are in the works and or planned for upcoming. But we just started that conversation. We're going to have some more information on that in the Program and Personnel Committee in January. So there's some more information to come on that. But just wanted to let folks know that work is being done, and we'll continue to pursue that. So thank you for
just one other thing for parents that may be watching. So if students are struggling in school, the buildings have or will be reaching out to those families and those students to make sure that they have access to the interventions that we discussed tonight. So
Pat Grudy, President.
Okay, great. Next, Facilities and Finance, Chairperson Huber.
All right, we have 2 items on the under the Facilities and Finance. First of which being a resolution to designate Assistant Superintendent for Finance to prepare the tentative budget for 2022 fiscal year of Community High School District 128 Lake County. May I have a motion to approve that as presented?
So moved.
So second.
Thank you. Any questions on that? We did discuss this earlier. This is really letting Dan go and do the budget for 2022. Okay, seeing none, let's call it, Carol.
Hessel.
Aye.
Huber,
Aye.
Lundstedt,
Aye.
Rooney,
Aye.
Batson,
Aye.
Carmichael,
Aye.
Grudy. Pat, oh, you're muted.
You're muted, Pat.
Sorry. Aye.
Thank you.
Kevin Huber School Board.
Okay, second item, we're doing a lot of HVAC work to make sure the buildings are ready for kids to get back in there. Mark, you want to tell us a little bit about what's going on at Libertyville and Vernon Hills? And then we're going to approve a contract for Train, I believe.
Okay, yes.
Mark Koopman, B&G.
Thank you, Kevin. As part of our indoor air quality study, we've found some equipment that we'd like to make the repairs on. At Vernon Hills, we found equipment that needed repairs, and we were able to make those repairs right away in-house. At Libertyville, we have found some equipment that we need to work and have to hire Train to take care of the work for us. This is a U.S. Communities pricing using co-op pricing. So I'd like the board to make a motion to for Libertyville High School Univent and AHU repairs to be conducted for the amount of $41,408.
All right, any questions of Mark? If seeing none, we talked about this facilities and finance as well. So no questions. Can I see that, have that motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Don Carmichael School Board.
Just a quick point here, just so that the community understands, part of the reasons why this is happening is because during COVID, ASHRAE came out with a new set of standards for how much fresh air needs to come into the buildings. So we had the study done in order to look at how our systems are operating and make recommendations. So we are fulfilling that as another effort to help return our students to the building safely.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Don. Other questions, comments on this one? Okay, let's call it, Carol.
Huber,
Aye.
Lundstedt,
Aye.
Rooney,
Aye.
Batson,
Aye.
Carmichael,
Aye.
Grudy,
Aye.
Hessel.
Aye.
Okay, any other for facilities and finance? If not, Pat, back to you.
All right, ISB, James.
Thank you, Dr. Grudy. Just a quick note, since we didn't get a chance to comment on this after the meeting of the ISB delegation in November. I know there were some members of our community that were very interested in a particular resolution. That resolution originally had been proposed and then rejected by the committee. There was they requested, the people that originally submitted it requested it to be, challenged that proposal and resubmitted it. So for that process, just so that the public knows, it's a two-step process. The delegation has to vote to reenact or reinstate that proposal to be voted on, and then a second vote to either approve or disapprove that resolution. The first vote did not carry, so in fact, we never got a chance to vote on the actual resolution that was proposed. I think it was resolution 2 on gun storage. So I just wanted to bring that back to the group and to the community that we didn't even have an opportunity to vote on that resolution. So unfortunately, that never came up. So I would encourage, though, there is some legislation floating around out there on that topic. So if anyone's interested in getting involved in that, look that up. I did, as part of my process to do due diligence, I talked to one of the co-sponsors of the bill that's actually running through the state legislature. And I know they're looking for some support on that. So they would welcome a witness slip or a phone call or whatever to your legislators, your local legislators. So other than that, the all the recommendations for the resolution committee went pretty much as anticipated.
Okay, thanks, John. Karen Cito?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that this past Wednesday was CEDAL's governing board, quarterly governing board meeting, which none of us could attend because we were conducting interviews. Kelly Hartwig was kind enough, our special ed director, to give me notes from her attendance. And so just a couple of things. The governing board heard and approved 2 memorandums of understanding, one with the CEDAL Teachers Union and one with the CEDAL Support Staff Association. So those are just having to do with COVID-19 and changes. The other main thing of the meeting was a presentation by HumanX, which is the consulting firm they're working with to improve the climate and culture in CEDAL. They reported on some survey results back in January initially, and now again they've done, so they're continuing to make some improvements. Obviously COVID has kind of thrown a wrench in this a bit, but there are small improvements and some not so small being made, so it's encouraging. So we'll keep reporting back on this, but just wanted to let you know that that happened, and that even though none of us were able to be there, that was the information that came forward.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Okay, so before we leave, I just want to take a minute here to publicly thank Mary. I want to thank you for your ongoing help and all of the communication efforts and getting that survey done. That was extremely helpful. Rita, I want to thank you for your ongoing efforts to just do everything humanly possible to get our staff ready for reopening in the second semester. I know there's a lot of behind the scenes work associated with that. Mark, I want to thank you for everything you're doing, not only to get us ready to reopen, but to get us ready for the grand opening of, frankly, a whole lot of facilities on both campuses. Bryant, you're the unsung hero behind the scenes, just keeping us all organized between COVID and superintendents and all these other good things. You're doing a remarkable job of doing all that. And then last and certainly not least, I want to thank Tom and John for their just unending work in the buildings, keeping our staff motivated, making sure we're ready, doing everything you can to reach out to students and address their increasing needs. It's clear that they're increasing the longer this goes. And I just can't thank all of you guys enough for everything you're doing. So just keep up the great work. And I hope I didn't forget anybody. Prentice, of course, and all of my fellow board members. All right. So with that said, I'd like to ask for a motion to move into an executive session. Again, topic is employment of an employee. The citation's 5 ILCS 120/2C1.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Roll call.
That was a good second, Lisa Hessel, by the dog. I like that.
Roll call, please.
Lundstedt,
Aye.
Rooney,
Aye.
Batson,
Aye.
Carmichael,
Aye.
Grudy,
Aye.
Hessel,
Aye.
Huber.
Aye.
All right. Is that it? All right. Motion carries. Again, when we return from executive session, we won't be taking any action other than to return to open session and adjourning the meeting. Okay. Thanks. Good night, everybody.
And
We'll see you.
Pat, you might have missed Dan's.